Man, I need y'all here for this. Can y'all just come over to the house, wear a mask, and because this is such good stuff. Welcome to U.S. history, and again, this is stuff that I lived through. I remember all of this so well. I was your age when this stuff was going on, and just a little older. So I was right in your age group, and I was politically active, so to speak, in that I cared. Okay, a lot of people your age, and we're going to start on chapter 27 today. You were supposed to read that first little section yesterday, but starting on page 591 and 592 is where the meat potatoes start. A lot of kids your age just say, well, whoever gets elected gets elected. I hope none of y'all are that way. I hope none of you think that way. Because what happens in our elections is crucial. It is important, and we're going to see that today. One of the things that happened in 1992. Now, we talked about the election of George Herbert Walker Bush, and Bush lied. He raised taxes, and so H. Ross Perot. Hey, look, I'm all ears. Hey, giant sucking sound from Mexico, taking all of our jobs down there. H. Ross Perot ran against George Herbert Walker Bush, took a lot of his votes away because Perot was conservative. So the conservative vote was split, similar to we talked about Teddy Roosevelt at length in class when that happened, and when he was running for president. But we also see a new guy from the state of Arkansas. You're well familiar with him. You know a little bit about him. Bill Clinton. Now, Bill, he was a good old boy. A lot of people called him Bubba. And Bill, he liked the ladies. He did. And you read in your book some of his scandals. He was from Arkansas. It's alleged that he dodged the draft, that he went to England during that time, supposedly to get out of the draft. All kinds of stuff. He did have a rough upbringing. I'm not going to lie. Bill Clinton did not have the best upbringing in the world. But your upbringing doesn't have to determine who you are, and the dude becomes president. It would have just been nice if he had been a good moral leader. Anyway, he was governor of Arkansas, big Democrat, and his wife, Hillary, had been active in politics for years. Hillary, and so they were kind of a power team. And some of the allegations during the election came out against Bill Clinton, some of the alleged women that he had left a trail of around the United States and around Arkansas especially. And they just kind of sloughed it off. And he kept preaching and teaching the economy. It's about the economy. It's about the economy. Well, he was elected. And his first term in office, they continued to investigate some of his series of women as, sexual immorality in his past. They continued to investigate that. But the big one was the Whitewater scandal. It was a land deal in Arkansas. And he supposedly used political influence, his influence as a governor, to make money off of this and use this public land deal as a private benefit for him and Hillary. And they investigated that to the point that he is going to lie to a grand jury about it later on, if I'm not mistaken. And it's going to lead to his impeachment. But also, one of the things that he did, he wanted, this is the liberal agenda, wanted homosexuals to be able to serve openly in the military. There was a big pushback against that, and that's where the don't ask, don't tell came from. You could be a homosexual in the military, just don't tell anyone, and don't ask anyone if they are. So that's where that policy came from. Bill Clinton had a couple of good things. One good thing, the Family and Medical Leave Act. Now, this is where if I have an ill family member, my wife is sick, God forbid, and she's like deathly ill, or we have a newborn child, then I can take a certain amount of time off, unpaid leave, to care for them, up to 12 weeks. Now, it's unpaid, but what that means is when I go back, you have to give me my job back. So I'm 12 weeks away from work. I'm not getting paid for it. but I do get to retain my job. And I think that was a good thing. And if there's some semblance of that still to this day. But a couple of bad things that he passed, in my opinion, one was the Brady Bill. Now, I'm all for being careful in who we sell guns to. I am. I see no problem with the background check as it exists. I've been through many a one before. But it depends on who's running the government. They could change some things and make it difficult with one little checkbox, it depends on, but anyway, won't get into all of that. The Brady Bill was named after Reagan's press secretary, Brady, who was shot when Reagan was, there was an attempt on his life. And you remember, we watched the video, and the guy that was laying on the sidewalk and he was severely injured, he lived through it, but he was, in bad shape for the rest of his life. And basically, the Brady Bill said that the buyer had to wait 5 days before they could get a gun and undergo a background check. This was nationwide. So when you hear liberals talk about, and it also banned certain assault weapons. But when you hear liberals talk about, well, we need background checks, well, we've had background checks for years, since the Clinton administration. Now, some of the pieces like the assault weapons ban, SKSs, things like that, that came off of that later on, and you were able to purchase an SKS, AK-40, things like that later on. But the Brady Bill, 5-day waiting period, that came off later on. That was kind of a cool down period. In other words, me and someone have a fight. I don't own a gun, and I go out and I buy one, and I'm heated and I'm mad at this person. And the thought was, well, if I have to wait 5 days, this cooling down period, then maybe I'll change my mind and won't injure them. Which guns are for protection, not for starting anything or hurting them. Just so you know that. Also, the National Voter Registration Act. It was the Motor Voter Act. It required states to allow voters to register to vote when they applied for or renewed a driver's license. So if you go in to get your driver's license, which who has the time? If you've been to the DMV for anything, it's going to take you a year and a half to get out of there. Who has time to register to vote too? But they had to allow, if you wanted to, I'm going in to get my driver's license or, renewal or whatnot, because most people get it at 16, not 18. But if you do, then I could also register to vote while I was there. And one of the big things he passed was the North American Free Trade Agreement. It was a trade agreement between Mexico. Got an itch down here on my ankle. I think a mosquito bit me. Mexico and Canada and the United States. North American Free Trade Agreement. The only bad thing is America got the bad end of the deal. And if you've heard Trump talk about this, he got rid of NAFTA recently, renegotiated it, where America got a good end to the deal, and we got our fair share out of the deal. And now it's called USMCA, I believe, United States, Mexico, Canada Agreement, or USCMTA, something like that. But NAFTA was a big thing for years, and America lost a lot of revenue. It opened up free trade, but the way the tariffs were set up, the way things were set up, it was not fair to the United States. So those were some of the things that Slick Willie, Bill Clinton did during his first 4 years. One of the things he tried was universal health care. And he put in charge of his universal health care task force Hillary Clinton. He put her in charge of it. And she, of course, big time liberal. They were going to roll out this health care plan. And it sounded good to Americans at first. Hey, this is great. We'll get some free health care, and until you start to see the details and how much it's going to cost. And remember, there's no such thing as a free lunch. So anytime you're getting free health care, free college, free anything else, it's going to cost someone somewhere. And it's going to cost the country somewhere. But details started emerging, and it failed. And it hurt Hillary tremendously, because this was her big thing. He would introduce her as the head of the task force for the health care and bring her out there. And she was supposedly working all this together, and she couldn't get the deal done. which was great. So it was going to be government-funded health care too, which never works. That's why people in Great Britain, when they have a serious health care issue, or Canada, when they need something big time done, they come to the United States because they have government-ran health care. And you need a heart transplant or something, and the heart's ready, and the doctor may say, well, you still got to wait another 3 or 4 months before we can get you in crazy stuff. One of the things that came out of all this, and your book talks about it, and I love it, because I started listening to this when I was 19 and 20 years old, in that ballpark, so about the same age as you are. Talk radio, conservative talk radio. Liberal talk radio has never worked. They tried a liberal talk radio network a few years ago. It failed. It bombed. It was pathetic. Nobody listened. In order for radio to work, you have to have sponsors. That's how radio works. That's why when you're listening to a song on the radio, and then they have 5 commercials afterwards, 5 30-second commercials or whatever, that's paying for the radio station. That's making revenue for the radio station, unless you're listening to like Moody or something like that, and they have the pledge drives, which pay for radio. It's not free. It's not something that's set up. So liberals have tried it. They couldn't get the sponsors. They couldn't get the advertisers, and therefore it failed. The reason you get advertisers is because it's good. It's entertaining. It's informative. And conservative talk radio became just that. One of the big ones, I've mentioned him in class several times, the great Rush Limbaugh, who was not on the air yesterday because I tuned in to listen. He's got lung cancer now. Pray for him if you get the opportunity. But Rush Limbaugh, I started listening to him when I was 20 years old and still listen to him, and I'm 50 years old now. So for 30 years I've been listening to him. But others came out of this. Sean Hannity came on a little bit later on the scene. Sean Hannity, I used to listen to him on a station out of Huntsville when he worked in Huntsville. He was at the studio in Huntsville, local talk. He went from there to Atlanta, from Atlanta to New York, and now he's on Fox, and the rest is history. Talk radio gave listeners an opportunity to not only listen to conservative ideas and people talking and espousing conservative ideas and Christian ideas in a lot of cases, but also you had the chance to pick up your phone and call in and say, hey, Sean, I've got a point I'd like to make. Oh, go right ahead. And you got to talk, you got to interact. So conservative talk radio was great, and it changed a lot of people's minds. Also during this time, you see a resurgence of the religious right and the moral right. And we talked about, you remember Pat Robertson, we watched the video, 700 Club. The guy has been around for years. He started the Christian Coalition. Now the Christian Coalition, they would mail out pamphlets to churches and to individuals, and they would say, hey, if you want conservative leaders, even locally, here's who you need to vote for. These are the most conservative people on the ballot, which was cool because a lot of people did not know that, and a lot of people by nature are conservative. I think most people by nature are conservative. It's when that nature is tainted. We have a built-in morality, and when something comes along to taint that, that's when we start to go liberal, in my opinion. But anyway, the coalition did well. Another one that came on the scene, Dr. James Dobson, Focus on the Family. You still hear Focus on the Family even today. They weren't as big into mailing stuff out, but they would go on radio and they would talk about abortion, anti-abortion. They would talk about freedom. They would talk about Christian principles and ideas. Great stuff. And it helped. And the only reason, until this time, there had been a law in place that said, hey, if you had a conservative on for 3 hours, you've got to have a liberal on for 3 hours too. And programmers said, that won't work. And that law was lifted under Reagan. And so as a result, you could have conservatives on 10, 12, 14 hours a day if you wanted to. And people loved it. They ate it up. And so those were some of the big names that happened during that time. And toward the middle of Clinton's first term, 1994, he was elected in 1992. So he had 2 years free reign with the Democrat House, the Democrat Senate. And in 1994, a guy by the name of Newt Gingrich from Georgia. Newt and some other House of Representative members and some other folks got together and they came up with the Contract with America. Now, the Contract with America put forth 10, I believe it was 10 popular bills. Now, a lot of them failed, but they said these are 10 popular bills that the American people by and large want. Term limits, balanced budget, things of those nature. And if you elect us to Congress, we will vote on these in the first 100 days, guaranteed. Contract with America. We're making a contract with you. You vote for us, and we'll take care of this for you. We'll at least vote on it and bring it up. Okay? It was the Republican Revolution, as it's been called by many, 1992. The Republicans, for the first time since Eisenhower, and that's going back many, many years, took over the House and the Senate, and the Speaker of the House became Newt Gingrich. That brings us up to date on page 594. Here's what I want you to do. There is a section quiz on page 595. Yes, it has 4 questions, and the fifth one is the star. What role do you think conservative talk radio played in the defeat or scale down of many of Clinton's early proposals? Hopefully you know that by listening to this today. But it was a huge thing. So there are 4 questions that I want you to answer. Number 1, 2, 3, and 4. Answer those. Submit those to me on page 595. Tomorrow we're going to talk about battling with Congress, the comeback kid, the election of 96 against Bob Dole. We'll get all of that in as we work on our final chapter in the book and the final chapter of the year. Kind of depressing. Hey, have a great day. Miss y'all.